In this video lesson, I'm going to show you how to make some complicated selections to get fiddly shapes like this isolated from their white background, and we're then going to take them, pop them into Photoshop and create an amazing symmetrical snowflake design. It's a kind of kaleidoscopic effect. If I click and zoom in, you can see that it's made up of repeating patterns containing our sharpenings and our paper clips. There's even some rubber bands in there as well. And it's a very complicated design. There's loads of layers in here. There's hundreds literally. But the cool thing is we just need to make one little group of layers, and then we can transform and rotate that group to create our symmetrical snowflake design. Now I'm just going to hit Tab to get the layers palette open so you can see the groups that we've got, and we can turn them on and off to show you the sections that we're going to create. And that is group 1. That's actually the area that we're going to drop in our shavings to. So it's a very small area, and we can do that with a small amount of layers, and we can then duplicate it to create another group and mirror it and transform it and so on until we get the symmetry that we want. So groups are a great way of dealing with zillions and zillions of layers. As you can see here, we've got lots of layers to play with, and it could get very, very complicated unless we had the option to group our layers together. We're also going to use shapes to help us create a stencil for our design, and we're also going to draw a little outline there to help us work out where we need to drop in our shavings before we start to group and mirror them. And to help us get our symmetry, we're also going to use Photoshop extras like guides and rulers. If I just turn on the guide, you can see they're crisscrossing the screen like so, and the rulers help get the measurements precise. So what I'll do is close that, and we'll start from scratch, and I'll show you how to create a document to add your shavings to create the snowflake. So pop up to File and choose New, and then set the drop down menu here to inches, and we're going to go for 12 inches width and 12 inches height. That gives us a nice square document. Set the resolution to 300 pixels for a nice high quality detailed print, and we can set the background contents to white as well for a nice clean background. Click OK to create your new document. And to help keep our snowflake looking symmetrical, we're going to add the rulers by pressing Ctrl and R, and we're also going to drag down some guides from the rulers. If you click and drag inside, you can drag down to here, which is 6 inches there, and drag left as well from the ruler at the side to create another intersection at 6 inches, and that gives us a nice symmetrical box that's broken up into 4 quadrants. And if you can't see your guides, make sure you go to View and go down to Extras. Make sure that's ticked so we can actually have our extras visible, and you can also go to Show and choose Guides here as well if that's not ticked. And we can also choose Snap To and make sure that Guides is ticked as well, and that helps us align things more effectively to our guides. Now, guides and rulers are called extras because that's what they are. They're extra to the actual document. They won't print out even though we can see them on the screen because they're just there to help us with our layout. We're now ready to draw a snowflake shape to help us create our kaleidoscopic design, and to do that we're going to go to the custom shape tool. So click to hold down on here and scroll down to the custom shape, and if you pop up to the options bar you can see we have some preset shapes already here, but not the snowflake that we're after. To get that we need to load it in from another collection, and to do that pop up to the flyout icon here, click and scroll down to nature, which you'll find down here, and then you can replace the existing shapes with the nature shapes by clicking OK, and there we have a collection of snowflake shapes. The one we're after is this one here. If you leave the mouse to hover over it, it'll say snowflake 2. So click to select that, and we're now ready to draw a snowflake onto our document. Now the snowflake's not going to appear in the final design, so we're just going to use it as a guide. So for a more subtle colour, click on Colour and choose a nice neutral grey. Click OK, and then we can hold the Shift key and click to draw a square snowflake shape. Something like that should do the trick. We can fine tune that. If we go to Edit, we can transform it by scrolling down to Free Transform Path, and the bounding box appears. You can then make sure the center point is actually overlapping the middle of these intersecting blue guidelines, and you can then scale it up or down by dragging to the right, holding the Shift key to constrain it. But what we're going to do is rotate it by dragging outside, and as I rotate to the top there, we can see that the snowflake's points are overlapping the vertical line. If it's not quite right, you can type in a value of 30 in this area here, and that rotates it perfectly by 30 degrees. Hit return to apply the change. Now the nice thing about this project is we're only going to fill one triangular section with our pencil shavings, and to do that we need to draw a guide, and we're going to use another shape tool here. We're going to go to the line tool and make sure that we've got this ticked here. This is to make sure we draw a shape and not a path. Press Ctrl+ to zoom in for a closer look, and then click at the center here with your line tool and then click and draw up to the point of the snowflake like so. You won't be able to see that line particularly unless you click in here and choose a darker grey. There you go. Now it'll stand out more effectively, and then click from that point there and continue drawing your triangular shape until you've then clicked and drawn another line to the center point like so, and that is where we're going to fill with pencil shavings to create the basic shape of our kaleidoscope. We can then duplicate and rotate that to create our symmetrical pattern. Now this triangular shape is created with 3 separate straight lines. So what we'll do is shift click to select the 3, then go to layer and choose merge layers, just to push them all into one shapeful layer like so, which we can turn on and off because we won't need this for very long. It's just going to be filled with our pencil sharpenings. Now, talking of pencil sharpenings, let's go and get them in Snowflake 2 before.jpg. Now, if you're using Photoshop Elements, then the technique you can use is to select the Magic Wand tool, choose a high tolerance of 40 because there's a nice range of whites, it's not just pure white, and untick contiguous to capture all of the bits of white hiding around these fiddly areas. You can then click to sample an area and then double click to unlock your background like so, and then hit backspace to delete the white background. Control D to deselect. And if we just Control plus to zoom in, you'll notice that it's not a bad selection, but it's caught some of the bits of white inside the shavings as well and removed those bits of white that haven't been removed that we'd like to remove. So it's not a perfect selection, but it's the best you can probably do using Elements. I'm just going to go back through history and show you a technique in Photoshop CS5 that's a little bit more powerful and effective. In CS you can pop up to Window and you can access the channels that make up the colours in the shot. There's the red, green and blue together, but you've got the red channel, the green channel and the blue channel as well. So what we're going to do is duplicate that by dragging it onto the Create New Channel icon, and then we're going to use levels to just crush the contrast and make the background more selectable. And to do that, let's go to Image Adjustments and we'll choose Levels. We can now crush the contrast by using the black and the white slider. So if we want darker blacks, drag this slider to the right and that will give you a value of around about 157, which gives you lovely dark shadows. You can type in that value yourself if you like, and we can then brighten up the background by dragging the white input level slider to the left, and that gives us even more contrast. If we take that to around about 217, now we've got really white, so that's going to be much easier to select later. We can also tweak the midtones as well if we drag this slider to about 0.57 or so. That just darkens the midtones and makes these blacks very black, the whites very white. Click OK and we can now make a much more effective selection. In fact, if you control click on blue copy, that will select the white background. You can then go to select inverse to select all of the shavings and then click back on RGB to go back to color. You can then press Control J and that will float the selected shavings onto a new transparent layer, which you can see if I just hide the channels layer, and there we can see it floating on top as layer 1. We can turn off the background layer now, and there we have our selected shavings, and you can repeat that channel based selection technique with Snowflake 3 before, and that helps you get lots of lovely paper clips and elastic bands and things like that. You can now go to a file like Snowflake 2 before and grab the polygonal lasso tool, and you can harvest particular shavings that look quite good. So if you just click and draw a rough and ready selection around the shaving, you can then Control C to copy it, pop back to your main document, Control V to paste it in there, and then Control T to get the free transform tool. You can then click here to constrain the scale and scale it down to something like 20% in the width and the height. Hit return to apply the change, and there we have our new shaving. I'm just going to Control plus to zoom in and then just use the space bar and grab the move tool, and we can then grab and drag that and place it into position somewhere like so. Now the cool thing is, once you've added one particular shaving to the document, you can duplicate it so you don't have to transform that anymore, and then you can grab the move tool and just drag the copy and place it somewhere else. If you Control T, the free transform tool appears and you can then drag it and position it somewhere else, just to create a bit of variety and make it look different to the first shaving. And that's a great way of quickly drawing new pixels and details into your document. Now because we've got that triangular shape to help define our document, don't place any shavings outside of it. They can overlap slightly of course, but what we're going to do is just add them to the snowflake stencil that we've got here and get them to draw a very rough and ready snowflake shape around the edge, but defined by this triangular border. We're then going to go and press Control Tab to cycle to our other open windows. Snowflake 3 before has got a lovely paperclip and a little staple there, so select those with the polygonal lasso tool, Control C to copy, and then scroll back to your main document, Control V to paste it in, Control T gives you the free transform tool, and then you can click here, type in 20%, hit return, and there you have these tools here which you can then move around to define the border of your snowflake section. Hit return to apply the change. Don't worry if there's a little bit of white speck there, because what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the shape once we've finished, and then we'll have a nice white background, so you're not going to notice too many white areas around the edge of your shavings or your paper clips. But let's turn that back on again for the moment. So Control Tab again to cycle through the open windows. I'm going to go and get some nice pencil shaving fragments there. We go and have a look at areas like this here, for example. Grab the polygonal lasso tool, and then what I'll do is I'll just click to select that shaving there, but some of these fragments around the edge as well. Double click to complete the selection, Control C, Control Tab again, Control V, and then we go Control T for free transform, and then click here 20% to scale it down consistently with all the other bits, and hit return to apply the change. You can then press V for the move tool and click and position this, and these little fragments here can overlap the edge. Control T again lets me rotate it round, and that gives us a rough and ready edge selection, but it's a little bit more natural, as if we'd actually laid this down in the real world, though it was obviously going to be really impossible to get real world pencil shavings to be symmetrical on either side. So that's why Photoshop is a powerful and unique tool to create this kind of kaleidoscope design. So continue harvesting bits of shaving and other bits of paper clip and even rubber bands from those source images, and then place them into this section here. And if I Control minus to zoom out, you can kind of see the type of design that we're creating. So it's fairly rough and ready and natural looking, and it's going to fill out our snowflake shape. Hit Tab again, and we now end up with loads of layers that we have to deal with. Now, one cool thing is if you just drag this to the right, we can click here and we can look at the panel options, because sometimes it's set to entire document. And if we do that, then you can't actually see the content of the layer, because most of the layer is transparent. There's a tiny little rubber band in there somewhere. We can't see it. So if you can't get a good thumbnail preview, click here, pop down to panel options and tick layer bounds, and then it will just show you the particular pixels that are on the layer and ignore the transparent edges. Click OK, and then you should get something that looks like this, which is much more useful to help you identify a particular layer's contents. Now you may want to select and fine-tune the position of some of your components, and it can be quite tricky if you can't work out which particular layer this is, because it just looks like another pencil shaving. So what you can do is grab the Move tool, click on Auto Select Layer, and change the drop-down menu to make sure that you're choosing layer instead of group. And then if we click on this shaving here, it will then select the relevant layer, which we can then transform and rotate or hide or scale or do whatever we like very, very easily. If we want to get this yellow one up here, just click and it selects it automatically. So that's a really cool tip indeed. So we've done most of our hard work now, because we've created the components for our snowflake. We just need to duplicate these, but first of all we need to group them to make these layers more manageable. I'm just going to scale down the layer thumbnail size as well, so I can see more layers in the layers palette. And again, to do that, click on the flyout icon here, go back to panel options, and we can just change the thumbnail size to something smaller. We can then fit more of those into the layers palette. And what I'm going to do is go to the top, click to select it, scroll down to the bottom of my pencil shavings and other bits and bobs, and shift click. I can then select all of those and turn them into a much more manageable group by going to a layer and choosing Group Layers. And there we have a group that's full of pencil shavings, which you can turn on and turn off like so. We no longer need this guideline anymore, so I'm going to turn that off, and we can see the background more clearly. In fact, I can take this layer here down a little bit and reduce the opacity even more to make it more subtle like so. And all those lovely layers are still able to be edited. If you click here to uncollapse the group, you can then go down to individual layers and fine-tune them at your leisure. Okay, let me close the group up again, and we're now ready to start thinking about transforming and duplicating that group to create the rest of our snowflakes components. Now I'm going to Control minus just to zoom out a little bit more and see my shot as a whole. I'm just going to move this to the left there so we get a better view, and here is our group ready to be transformed and duplicated. It might be worth pressing Control plus to zoom in and get a better look at this particular part of the snowflake, and then click to select the group, drag the folder icon onto the Create New Layer icon like so, and that creates an identical copy. We can then transform the group by pressing Control and T to get the free transform window. Now if you grab this bottom middle handle and drag it up, you can scale and transform the group minus 100%. We can actually type in a value here of minus 100 by just replacing the original details. There you go, and there you have a transform group. Now there's a pivot point in the middle here that we can move to the tip of our snowflake, which is round about here. We can then rotate it like a hinge and it's now closing to actually mirror the original group shape. It's not in the right position just yet, but you can fine-tune things quite happily by actually clicking and dragging until it's more in a position where it's symmetrical and it's filling the entire edge of the snowflake. Something like that should do the trick. You can fine-tune the position of the pivot just to get it into the right place, and then that should look fairly symmetrical to both halves. Hit return when you're happy, and you should have two symmetrical groups filling one arm of your snowflake. Okay, our snowflake doesn't look very complete yet, but we're going to complete it very quickly now because we've created those two handy and symmetrical groups. So shift click to select both groups in the layers palette like so, then drag them onto the create new layer icon to duplicate them, and then Control T to get the ever useful free transform tool. This time, now that the groups are in the right position, we're going to drag this down to the center point here like so. If we Control plus, we can zoom in and reposition that more effectively. If we just place it over the blue guideline just at the center of the image, we can then rotate the shot either by free rotating it or by typing in a precise value, and we want to do a value of -60. So click to select this box, type in -60, and that will rotate it very precisely. Hit return, and we now have this particular group section in the right place to fill the next section of snowflake. Let me just press Z for the zoom tool once the transformation is complete, fit on screen, and there we have the next completed section. Okay, things are going to get even easier in just a tick because we just need to duplicate these two now by clicking here and dragging down to the create new layer icon. Again, we've got two copies now of those groups. Control T gets us the free transform tool again, and now we can just drag this down to the center point again like we did before, and then rotate it like so. Again, it's going to be a value of -60 to fit the snowflake, so you can type that value in at the top for precision, which is very important with symmetry, and then hit return, and now we've got the top half of our snowflake completed. Okay, the end is in sight now because we've got our top section here. We just need to duplicate the groups and flip that to create a mirror image and complete our snowflake design. So click to select the top one there, hold down the shift key and click to select group 1, and all the ones in between will become selected. You can then drag them all onto the create new layer icon, and you may find at this stage Photoshop is chugging away because there's literally hundreds of layers inside these groups now, so there's a lot for it to work with and it's doing a lot of processing power. I can then Control T to get the free transform tool, or I can get it from up here as well. You might be into going to menus, so choose free transform from there, and then we can just scale it down by -100 to create the mirror image, and I can do it manually. It's easier of course to click up here and do it precisely by typing in a value to get it specific. So a value of -100% should do the trick. Hit the return key to activate the transform, and then you should see the mirror image appear like so. Here we go. So we no longer need the extras we used to create this image, so Control R gets rid of the rulers. I can go to View and go down to Extras, and we can actually then show or hide the guides by ticking them like so, and that cleans things out a little bit more. And we no longer need this shape at the background there, so we can click here to turn that off. And I've zoomed in for a closer look, and it can be quite handy to be able to select individual layer components very quickly by clicking to select the Move tool, auto select and layer, and then if I can see this one here has got a bit of a white background there, it would be better if we could push this to the bottom of the layer stack, so I can just click to select it instantly in the right group and then just drag it down below the other layers until it's at the bottom of its particular group's layer stack, and that places it below that blue layer which is on top now, and that gets rid of some of that white background. So I can click to select the other layers as well and just do the same thing very quickly, just drag them down to the bottom of their particular group's layer stack just to get rid of that little bit of white edge around the top of the shaving. So that's a fine-tuning thing you can do, but it's very useful to be able to select components very quickly using the auto select option. So you should end up with a lovely complicated design with lots of colours and textures and lots of lovely symmetry as well. If you just hold the spacebar down, you can have a closer look at all of the staples and paper clips and rubber bands that are making up your kaleidoscope. And what we're going to do is use the zoom tool, press Z, right click and zoom out to fit on screen, and you could then of course fine tune a group if it wasn't in the right position by selecting the move tool again, pop up to auto select, tick that, and this time choose group, and then if you click on the contents of a particular group it will select the group concerned. Let's do this one here. You can see it's changing depending on where I click, and you can of course Control T to transform a selected group like this one down here, and you could then change the pivot point, pop that in the center, and then drag outside to fine-tune the position of the rotation should you need to do that. But at this stage things should be nice and symmetrical, so to deselect that just press the escape key, and there we have, with the tab key to hide all the floating windows, our finished kaleidoscope snowflake design.